When Apple launched the Studio Display 2, I was originally a little bit disappointed because they didn't put the new features in it that everyone's been waiting for, like 120 Hertz ProMotion. You have to go up and buy the Studio Display XDR for about $3,000 if you want that feature. And it's still just stuck at 27-inch 5K. So at first I was kind of disappointed, but the more I looked into it, the more interested I was in the features that it had. So in this video, we're going to talk about my experience with the Studio Display 2, if I think it's for you, or if I think you should pick up a different option instead. The Studio Display still has the excellent 5K 5120 by 2880 panel size as before. It's one of the sharpest external displays you can get in this price range. It does top out at 600 nits of brightness, but that's bright enough for a well-lit office, and it's even brighter than your MacBook Air's built-in screen. I found no issues with this, and I typically run it at about 70 to 80% brightness, and if I'm having issues with too much sunlight on a certain day, I just jack it up to 100% brightness. That's always been enough for me. The biggest drawback with this monitor is that everyone was hoping for 120 Hertz, and all we got is 60 Hertz. This is the refresh rate of the monitor, so how fast you can see stuff moving across the screen, and Apple saved this high refresh rate for the Studio Display XDR. But this does still carry over all the other great features that the original Studio Display had, like True Tone, to adjust the color temperature depending on the lighting in your room, as well as supporting the wide color gamut. And this has excellent contrast on it, and I just really like how the screen looks. It has the Apple look, which is going to feel very similar to using the built-in monitor on your MacBook Air or your MacBook Pro. One of the coolest things about the Studio Display, though, is that it just uses one single cable to both power your laptop as well as to transfer the video signal, which is really cool because you might not even need a docking station if you have the Studio Display 2, especially because this one has a better web camera, and it also has better speakers, which I've actually been really impressed with the speakers. I've got really nice studio monitors, and some days I still just do all my listening and video editing through the Studio Display 2's speakers. The speakers are a little bit louder, the low end sounds clearer, and I'd say the overall soundstage is just wider with it. With the camera, it just looks better across the board. It's sharper, does better in low light, and it also supports center stage tracking, which is a nice little trick. Here's a test of the web camera and the microphone built into the new Studio Display 2 so you can get an idea of the quality to expect out of this. The Studio Display 2 also supports center stage, which is supposed to automatically follow you as you move along around your camera, which is kind of an interesting feature, but it also feels like a gimmick sometimes. It's a little slow to catch up, and there's other times where it feels really jumpy. So personally, I feel like center stage is a little bit funny, but it's also a nice feature to have. The camera also adds desk view support, which I haven't found to be super useful. That's just supposed to show whatever's in front of you so you can use that for presentations, but to me, it just looks kind of grainy and kind of distorted. So personally, I don't really recommend desk view, but it is nice that it's still included. Let's talk about the ports on the Studio Display. It has one Thunderbolt 5 in, it also has a second Thunderbolt 5 out, and there's two more USB-C ports on it. And the Thunderbolt 5 port is probably the biggest headline spec on the computer because that means you can actually daisy chain more peripherals, and I love that they added that second port on it for keeping a second display or fast storage or really anything on it. Unfortunately, this does still top out at 96 watts of power in your Mac, which is going to be just fine for most people if you're using a 14-inch MacBook Pro or any of the MacBook Airs. Then 96 watts is more than enough, but it doesn't have the 140 watts that the 16-inch MacBook Pro really likes to have. It can still work with your 16-inch MacBook Pro, but if you got the M5 Max chip and it's under really heavy workload, then you may find that the power levels on your computer drop a little bit, but it should still be able to keep up. One big omission from the Studio Display, and this is kind of by design, is the fact that it doesn't have HDMI, which is unfortunate because that really pigeonholes the Studio Display into just being a display for your Apple devices. You can't use it as a display for your game console or a Blu-ray player or something like that. It does also work with USB-C sources, like I've run it just fine with my MacBook Neo, and it also works fine with the iPad Air that doesn't have Thunderbolt, but you're not going to get the full bandwidth or the full resolution depending on the device that you're using it with. One of the big drawbacks to the Studio Display that Apple still has not solved is the fact that you have to buy it with the stand you want it on from the factory. And if you want to change the stand, you're going to have to go do that later, and you're going to have to spend at least $400 for Apple to change that stand for you. So you can get it with the standard glass and tilt adjustable stand, which is the default. That's the one I have. You can also spend extra money to get the tilt and height adjustable stand, which is cool. It does also raise the height of it up at the lowest level, and that's part of why I didn't get that one. You can also get it with the VESA mount adapter installed on the back, which is so funny to me that there's no VESA slot on it because that stand is fixed in it. So you just got to decide what you want before you even buy it, if you're going to do it VESA or if you're going to use the height adjustable one. It's just one of those things that you don't want to have to go spend the money later on to get that changed, because it's just going to make this display even more money. Another thing that's really bugged me about this is the fact that the power cable is permanently attached on the back, and Apple hasn't changed this from the original model. This is so annoying because if you want to move it around your desk, you have to deal with the permanently attached cable, which makes cable management more annoying. Or if you wanted to just unplug it and take it somewhere but not remove your power cord, then you can't do that either. So you got to just always take it with the power cord that's permanently attached. Come on, Apple. Let's fix this. The main reason you buy a studio display versus something from a third-party manufacturer is the fact that it's got everything in it that you need and it just works. You don't have to deal with weird menus or buttons underneath it. You can actually control the screen brightness, the speaker volume, all through the buttons on your MacBook's keyboard or your Bluetooth keyboard as well. It's just super consistent regardless of what Mac computer you use it with. You don't need any drivers. If you're deep in the Apple ecosystem, this is the plug and play option you need, and this is how you can turn pretty much any computer into an iMac. And then when you're not working at your desk, all you got to do is unplug the single cable from your computer and you can take it anywhere. A lot of people say, but Adam, I really need 120 hertz. I would say most people really don't need 120 hertz. It does make the OS feel a little bit smoother. It is nice for gaming, but for video editing, or if you're just looking for color accurate work or design work, it doesn't matter. Your eye's not grading footage at 120 hertz. It's grading at whatever the frame rate is that you're editing in, and most people are editing at 24 or 30 frames a second anyways. Another question I get asked is, does the Studio Display 2 match the original? I've got both of them behind me, and I would say they're close enough. Honestly, most days when I'm looking at my Studio Display 1 and my Studio Display 2, I can't really tell or remember which side I even put the Studio Display 2 on, because it is that close to the original, minus the webcam quality, the speaker quality, and the extra Thunderbolt port on the back of it. Those are really the only changes from the original, and I find it pairs really well with the original one. So don't feel like you got to go sell your original Studio Display if you want to add a Studio Display 2. How I have it set up is I have a cable going from my Mac Studio into the Studio Display 2, and then I'm using the Thunderbolt 5 daisy chain port on the Display 2 to plug into the Display 1. This has been working great. I love this daisy chain setup. That's one of the nicest parts of it. And that's the reason that I went ahead and bought the Studio Display 2 as my second display instead of going out and buying another Studio Display 1. Even with Apple's recent price increases, the Studio Display prices have stayed pretty consistent. So you can get the standard glass version for $1,600. You can also upgrade and get nano texture glass, which just is this anti-reflective coating that's kind of cool, but you do lose a little bit of contrast. Then it goes up to $1,900. If you want to get it with the standard glass and the tilt and height stand, you spend $2,000, and to get nano texture glass, tilt and height stand, it goes up to $2,300. Apple does also have the new Studio Display XDR with mini LED and 120 hertz, and that's $2,900 for the VESA version or $3,200 for the tilt and height. So you can pretty much get two of these for the price of one of the XDRs. The XDR does support HDR, which is a nice feature. It has 120 hertz, but to me, that's not worth spending the extra money on unless you really need that HDR workflow, because the Studio Display 2 still has all the other great upgrades that the XDR has. I would say the biggest competitor to this display right now is finding a used or refurbished Studio Display 1 for about $1,000. And if you're trying to decide between that or the two, I think you really got to ask yourself, do you plan on daisy chaining? In which case, I'd get the Studio Display 2. Do you care about sound quality? In which case, I would get the Display 2 because it's got the better speakers on it. If you do a lot of video calls, the camera on the Studio Display 2 is also worth spending the extra money on. Otherwise, the original still holds up really well. It's just those subtle quality of life improvements that make it worth spending extra money on. And I have been seeing the Studio Display 2 on sale for anywhere from $1,400 to $1,450 for the tilt and height adjustable one. And it's also been on Apple's refurbished site. Be sure to check links in the description for the best current prices. The biggest drawback to this monitor to me is the fact that everyone expected more out of this upgrade. And we ended up just getting a refresh with another second more expensive monitor. So we didn't get 120 hertz. We didn't get an upgraded panel. But at the end of the day, this is still super color accurate. The speakers do sound better. They give enough of those subtle quality of life improvements with it that make it still a great buy, even though it is pretty expensive. I would say it's worth buying though, because you get that excellent Apple ecosystem integration with the brightness adjustment, the volume control on the keyboard, and the fact that you can realistically own a single display with so many different computers. I've just sold my LG Ultrafine 5K monitor that I bought 10 years ago, and I use that thing with 6 or 8 different laptops over the years. I upgraded laptops more often than I upgraded the display, and I would say that's the reason that you buy a studio display, because this is the kind of screen that you can own with multiple computers, and instead of having to get a all-new iMac with an all-new display every few years, you can buy this once and just swap out a MacBook Air with it, or a Mac Mini, Mac Studio. Any of the Apple computers work great with the Studio Display. So to tie it all together, the Studio Display 2 has several pros to it, namely the 5K resolution. It's still super sharp and works excellent with Mac OS. It's got True Tone, wide color, 600 nits of brightness, which is more than enough for indoor use. Thunderbolt 5 upgrade with the ability to daisy chain more peripherals is huge, and of course the seamless Mac integration is just as good as it's ever been. The main drawbacks to it are the fact that it's still stuck at 60 Hertz when some competitors are pushing higher, the power cable that you can't remove, and the fact that they really didn't change much from the 2022 original, and the stand upgrades and swaps on it are still expensive and frustrating. Overall, really recommend this for you if you're an Apple ecosystem user and you want zero fuss, no drivers or third-party software to worry about, or just inconsistencies or incompatibilities. This thing is going to look perfect next to your Mac's display if you want to use your computer open beside it, or if you're pairing it with a Mac Mini or Mac Studio, this performs just as well for those users as well. So overall, highly recommend the Studio Display 2. If you're interested in buying one, I got links to buy in the description below. If you got any questions, leave a comment. I'd love to hear them.